So a couple quick things before we begin. First, you may notice up here that there is no writing assignment for Tuesday, right? I want you to read the first 2/3 or so of Chapter 7 in Writing Analytically and come prepared with any questions that you have about the material, but you don't actually have to write anything for next time. We're going to be talking next time about thesis statements. We're going to be spending kind of the whole week next week on thesis statements and developing a good thesis statement and building a paper around a thesis, because it's been my general experience that that's what first-year students actually have the most trouble with. So we're going to try to spend a good bit of time on that. And then next week is the last week for a while that we're going to be using Writing Analytically, right? This doesn't mean sell it back to the bookstore. It doesn't mean throw it away or shred it or burn it in some sort of nocturnal ritual celebrating your freedom from tyranny, right? Keep it, because we're going to be coming back to it, but we're going to be putting it aside for a little while. So the week after next is when we're going to be starting on Voltaire's Candide, right? So make sure that...
Those two small books?
Yeah, the two small books, the Voltaire and the Rousseau, right? Yes. Has everybody got those? Okay, where was the book? Is the bookstore out of them again? That's okay. So I will just say, they're real cheap. They're like $3 each, and you can get them easily on Amazon or wherever else. Yeah. No, normally, I feel like I know with the Writing Analytically, it's relatively expensive, and a lot of people use financial aid bucks to buy it. You can't do that with Amazon, but including shipping and handling for the two Voltaire and Rousseau books, if you get it from Amazon, you're out $7. So
I will.
yeah, and it is important that we're all using the same editions because it's translated from French. So if you get a different edition, it's probably going to be a different translation. So you won't be looking at quite the same thing as myself and Jennifer. So. Okay, so does anybody have any questions about anything else before we get started? Okay, so let's just do a little bit of review from what we did last time, and then I want to move on to talking about how you actually use evidence to build claims, right? So that's kind of where we're going to finish up today. So I haven't had a chance yet to grade your homework from last time. I will probably do that this afternoon when I'm done teaching. I mean, there are only 2 of you, so it doesn't take very long. And I just had other shit I had to do this morning. But, so I'll get that to you this afternoon. But I do want to quickly just go over a few of the enthymemes I got from you and from other students in the other section, just to make sure everybody gets this. I got some good ones here too. So one that I got from a couple of people was this advertising slogan. America runs on Dunkin'. So pick this apart here for a second. What are the unstated premises here? Let's think first about and I know that this is a company that has only recently even started opening branches in this part of the world, right? Y'all were probably used to Krispy Kreme. So what is Dunkin'? What does Dunkin' serve? Coffee and donuts, yeah, good. All right, who doesn't love coffee and donuts? And do we tend to think of either of these things as kind of being similar to fuel?
Yes.
Which one?
Coffee.
Coffee, right? Yes. If I don't have my cup of thick black inky tarry coffee here in front of me, right, I can't teach this class, right? I can't get through the 75 minutes. So yeah, we tend to think of coffee as being like fuel because it helps keep you awake, right? It's a stimulant. So why does America run on Dunkin'?
Because America runs on coffee.
Yeah, because America runs on coffee. And Dunkin' serves coffee, right? Good.
So if we were to write that, determining you would just put America runs on coffee because Dunkin' serves coffee.
I think that you would probably also need to make that fuel connection too, right? So what I'm looking for you to do here is, right, explain the ideas that animate this, right? What are the assumptions behind this? What are the things that are implied here? All right, so let's try another one here. So dogs are happy. So they will make you happy. What's the unstated premise here?
Dogs are a person with
Well, but there are people, like evil people, who shouldn't be trusted, right? But there are people who don't like dogs, right? Personally, I love dogs. Oh, I don't know about you. You'd like my dog. My dog is the best. Okay, so, but is the assumption here about dogs or about happiness? Okay, so yeah, what's it saying? So what is this enthymeme saying about happiness? What's the argument that's being made here about happiness, or the nature of happiness?
share between two.
Yeah, that it's contagious, right? That if you're around someone or something that is happy, that'll make you happy too, right? Good. All right, and let's try one more. With fewer calories, Lay's Wow chips let you eat like a kid. This one might be a little harder than the other two, but try to think it through.
You eat as many as you want and still have energy.
Okay, yeah, you can eat as many as you want and you won't get fat, right? Why? How is that like letting you eat like a kid? Kids don't give a shit what they eat, right? Kids will eat anything, especially if it's pressed into nugget form. Yeah, that's exactly what's right. Kids don't care about things like calories or whether something's healthy, right? Kids just eat what tastes good. So Lay's Wow chips let you eat like a kid because you don't have to worry about the calories, right? All right, good. Does anybody have any questions about enthymemes? It feels like y'all get it. And sometimes it just takes a minute to sit there with it and work it out, right? And if it doesn't come to you immediately, the best thing to do is just try to question the specific words, right? The specific terms, right? So like what's Dunkin', right? What does Dunkin' serve? Okay, they serve coffee, right? Runs on. Okay, this is probably some kind of reference to fuel, right? So how is what Dunkin' serves like fuel? All right, there we go, right? Okay, so I do want to talk a little bit about the claim and evidence stuff too, because I think that's going to be our major focus today. So remind me from last time, what's the difference between a claim and evidence? What is a claim?
It's not a fact.
Yeah, so a claim is a statement that is not objectively true on its own, right? So it's something that must be demonstrated. So then what is evidence?
Details that make a claim true.
Well, which should you be examining first? What should you be doing first? Making a claim or picking evidence? You should be looking at evidence first, right? And using evidence to make a claim. So if a claim is a statement that's not objectively true, what is evidence?
A statement that is objectively true.
Yeah. So a claim is usually going to be an interpretation of evidence, right? So one good rule of thumb to follow is that if something looks like it's an interpretation of a fact, right? Somebody reading something into or out of a fact, that's probably a claim, right? Other good means of recognizing when something is a claim, if I start a sentence or include in a sentence something like I believe, or in my opinion, or should, or I feel, am I making a claim or am I citing evidence? Yeah, those are all words that signal this is a claim, right? This is something that the writer is trying to convince you of. Anything that you could look up and verify would qualify as evidence, right? So, to give you an example, if I write that President Andrew Jackson's policies toward Native Americans were racist, is this a claim or is this evidence?
Claim.
This is a claim, right? So I'm saying something, yeah, about things that Jackson did as president that is based on my interpretation of certain pieces of evidence, right? So if I were to provide some of that, right? So say like, you know, he moved the Cherokee off of their lands in Georgia to make room for white settlers, right? Yeah, that would be something that I could look up and verify, right? Now, is one piece of evidence usually going to be enough to make a large claim like this?
No.
Probably not, right? So if I want to make particularly a claim that is this big, right, I would need to have more evidence than this. But at least we understand kind of what the distinction is, right? But this is a trap that people sometimes fall into, is the complex phenomenon simple cause trap, right? Assuming that, a big complicated thing can be explained by one small simple thing, right? So I'm going to relate a story to you. I call this the VH1 story of the origin of heavy metal music, because this is the claim they're constantly trotting out, right? And it's a good story, right? But the basic story is that in 1966, in Birmingham, England, a young guitar player is working in a steel plant and is, the following day about to go on tour in Europe with his band. And he's just trying to make, a little bit of extra money before he leaves on the trip, right? Because he doesn't have his mind on his work. He's not watching what he's doing very carefully. He sticks his hand into the machine that cuts the steel sheets, and it cuts the tips of the fingers of his left hand off, right? Now, if you're a guitar player, this is a serious problem, because those are the fingers you use to press down on the frets, right? So he finds he can't do this anymore without intense pain. So he finds a solution to this by tuning his guitar down a couple octaves to make it kind of like deeper, lower, but really to make the strings looser so it's easier to play. And from this sound, this deep, low sound and the simple riffs he's able to play, which is all he can play now, heavy metal music is created, right? So, it's a good little story that gives a neat little solution to something, right? But a whole genre of music is too big and too complicated to be created by one single industrial accident, right? So that story ignores, that there were other kind of loud blues rock bands operating in England and the United States at that time. It ignores a number of other factors that could help explain the rise of this style of music, right? So, yeah, try not to fall into the complex claim, simple evidence trap, right? Be very, very careful of this. Now, I want to give you a couple of examples here to see how good we're getting at recognizing the distinction here between a claim and evidence. So the first example I'm going to give you is from a book by the British writer George Orwell. It's called The Road to Wigan Pier, and he wrote it in the 1930s during the Depression, when he was checking on the conditions of miners in the north of England. So Orwell says, first, middle-class people are fond of saying that the miners would not wash themselves properly, even if they could, but this is nonsense. Second sentence, where pithead bats, that is bats that are right at the mine, exist, Practically all the men use them. So which of these is a claim and which is evidence? Which of these could you possibly check up on and verify?
First one, I think,
Why do you think the first one, Jennifer?
because you can go up to like the people and kind of smell, I guess, if it's kind of true.
Well, what should be the giveaway in the first sentence that this is a claim? There are actually two things here that are giveaways. Middle-class people are fond of saying that the miners would not wash themselves properly even if they could, but this is nonsense. Yeah, but this is nonsense, right? Essentially what he's doing is calling bullshit on this other group of people, right? So he's making a claim here. He's offering an interpretation of something that other people think, right? And what these other people think, right, is an interpretation of the behavior of the miners. So anything that can be read as interpretation is probably a claim. Other giveaways here, right? One is that if you're speculating about someone else's state of mind, or opinions, it's probably a claim, right? Because as we'll get to in a moment, right, none of us can read minds, right? Okay. Yes, none of us can actually read each other's minds. But yeah, this is the evidence here, right? You can check up and see whether people actually use the bats that are provided to the mines, right? All right, so I'm going to give you another example. This is from the work of the German art theorist Walter Benjamin. And Benjamin writes, mechanical reproduction of a work of art represents something new. Second sentence, the Greeks knew only two procedures of technically reproducing a work of art: founding and stamping. And I don't think you actually need to know what all of these terms mean in order to make the distinction here, right?
The bottom is everything.
Okay.
The top is
How do you know the bottom one is evidence, Morgan?
because you said you don't have any like opinion words in it.
Yeah, there's no opinion. There are no opinion words here, right? This is basically stating a fact about a past civilization that you could look up in a book, right? You could look up and see, okay, did the Greeks know how to reproduce works of art by machine? No, they only knew these two techniques which have to be done by hand, right? And the conclusion then that Benjamin draws from this is that mechanical reproduction of a work of art represents something new, right? Something that ancient peoples did not know. So yeah, so this is a claim because it is an interpretation of this fact, right, of this piece of evidence?
Okay, so basically we just picking out a couple evidence, couple claims, putting them together, and then but making sure it's like the evidence detailed enough for the claim.
So I think what you want to do, if you're asking me like what you're supposed to do in your own writing? Okay, so what you want to do in your own writing, we're going to practice this in a little bit, right? You're going to want to do that kind of work we've been doing first, right? Where you're going to gather data from whatever you're looking at, and you look for those patterns, right? And then what you want to try to do in your main claims, right, is argue for, this particular pattern exists, and this is why it matters, right? So you were actually doing this last time with the poem, right? You noticed, for example, you noticed like a set of words that referred to things like beauty and art, right? So like on the surface, this poem is about a crowd watching a baseball game, but you could also make the argument that it's really about art, right? Whereas, you found those kind of dark, kind of dangerous words.
So we doing how we did with the poem.
Mm-hmm.
Like just picking out something we see in the writing, and then making a claim about it, and then put it.
Yeah, because then you've already examined the evidence, right?
Because I thought we were just supposed to go. I'm glad you said that.
Okay, yeah. So now we're making the connection between what we did last time and what we're doing now, right? Okay, and what we're gonna do again, and what we're gonna do really kind of all semester because it's the most important part of writing.
500 words.
What's that?
500 words.
Oh, you're not gonna have to write for next time. Remember?
I'm talking about for this homework.
Oh, okay. Oh no. So for this homework, all I was really asking you to do was take a piece of your own writing and identify which sentences are claims and which are evidence. And then kind of look and see like what the ratio is in your own work between claim and evidence, right? How many claims are you making compared to pieces of evidence? And in general, you should be using more evidence than making claims, right? In a good paragraph, you should really only have one main claim. Right? If you've got more than two claims, then you're trying to do too much in that paragraph, right? And remember that each claim is probably going to require multiple pieces of evidence to demonstrate, right? Because what you're trying to interpret not just facts, but patterns of fact. All right, so let's just try one more example, and then we'll move on to something else. So, this last example I want to give you is from the work of a psychoanalyst by the name of Frantz Fanon, who was a major theorist about kind of like the nature of colonial societies and what colonialism and imperialism do to people, both to the people who have been colonized and the people who are doing the colonizing. This is from a book he wrote called Black Skin, White Masks. And the first sentence is, the colonized is elevated above his inferior social status in proportion to his adoption of the mother country's cultural standards. So, before we try to interpret this, I just want to make sure that we all understand what this sentence means, right? Because I know it's translated from French, so it's a little bit complicated, right? What does this sentence mean? The colonized is elevated above his inferior social status in proportion to his adoption of the mother country standards, cultural standards in particular. I should put that in there. So if you are a member, according to this sentence by Fanon, if you are a member of a sort of colonized or minority group, what do you have to do in order to increase your social status?
Put yourself out there.
Well, how? How so?
In this case,
In this case, what is he saying you have to do?
adopt other cultural standards.
Yeah, you have to adopt whatever the dominant culture standards are, right? So if, say, you are Senegalese, and Senegal is colonized by France, right? Whose cultural standards does a Senegalese person have to abide by, according to Fanon, in order to move ahead in society? Well, if Senegal is colonized and dominated by France.
Well, you gotta go do that with France.
Yeah, exactly, yes. So what he's saying here is that when you are part of a colonized culture, you have to assimilate to the colonizer's culture, right, in order to move ahead in society. And then the second sentence here is, in the French colonial army, the black officers served first as interpreters. So, which of these two statements seems more like a fact, and which seems more like an interpretation? Yeah, this is something you could actually look up, right? You could go through French colonial army records and you could see what kind of jobs were assigned to black officers, right? So yeah, this is evidence. This is something that you could, with a little bit of legwork, verify, right? So this is a claim, right? An interpretation of that evidence, right? Okay, so if black officers in the French colonial army are only being promoted based on how well they can speak French, then moving ahead in society must be based on assimilation, right? So he's interpreting this particular fact, right? Now, one thing that we're doing here, right, as we are distinguishing between claim and evidence, we're also thinking about the connection between the claim and the specific piece of evidence, right? Because it's not always going to be clear to your reader why this means this, right? Though, remember the thing I said about mind reading a minute ago, right? Your reader, which for most intents and purposes in this class is going to be me and occasionally one of your classmates, doesn't automatically understand why you are making connections between certain pieces of evidence, right? And doesn't automatically understand how you're generating a particular claim out of a certain piece of evidence. So how do we resolve that? What do we do then to make sure that your reader understands the logic of your interpretation? Yeah, you have to explain why this means what you think it means, right? And so there's a way of thinking about this that is helpful, or at least I think it's helpful. I hope you will as well. So there's a British philosopher of language by the name of Stephen Toolman, who developed a complex multi-part theory of argumentation. We don't need to worry about most of Toolman's theory of argumentation, right? We're just going to focus on a basic, stripped-down, three-part version. Right? So Toolman essentially breaks down an argument into what, three parts. It was claim, data, and warrant. So we know what a claim is, right? And what do we think data might be equivalent to?
Evidence.
Yeah, data is just, the same thing as evidence, right? So the odd thing out here, the thing we haven't encountered yet, is the warrant. What do you think warrant is in Toolman's formulation? What do you mean by conclusion?
Kind of summarizes like the whole paragraph in one.
Not quite. Are you thinking that because it comes after the other two here?
I mean,
well, and maybe think about this in terms of like in legal terms, right? What is a warrant?
something that allows you to search people's properties or something like that.
Yeah, and I think that the key word here, the key connection here is it allows, right? It's something that gives you permission. So the warrant is the thing that allows you to make this claim based on this data, right? That's what Toolman means by it. So say I make the claim that I am a U.S. citizen. The data that I use to back this up is that I was born in Pennsylvania. What is the warrant then that connects this data to this claim?
The hospital you were born
Well, the hospital doesn't enter into it, right? The hospital doesn't actually matter. All that matters is that I was born in the state of Pennsylvania, right? What's the logical connection here between being born in Pennsylvania and being a U.S. citizen?
Pennsylvania is found in the United States.
Yes. Pennsylvania is in the U.S. Do either of you know what the 14th Amendment guarantees? Okay, so the 14th Amendment is the amendment that states that anyone born on U.S. soil is a U.S. citizen, right? So the origin of this particular amendment, right, it was passed at the end of the Civil War so that citizenship rights could not be denied to freed slaves, right? If you were born here, then you're a citizen. But yeah, the effect of this for our purposes here is that, yeah, because I was born in Pennsylvania and anyone born in the U.S. is a U.S. citizen, right? This explains how I can make this claim, right? This explains the logical connection. Now, if I used a different piece of data, for example, I could say my parents were born in the U.S., right? Then the warrant would be different, right? It'd be, well, children of U.S. citizens are also citizens, right?
Okay, I'm not getting it. So for the warrant, you just restate the claim? That's what it seems like.
No, I'm not restating the claim. What I'm doing is providing the logical connection between the data and the claim, right? So I can say that I am a U.S. citizen based on the fact that I was born in Pennsylvania, because anyone born in the U.S. is a citizen, right? This legal fact allows me to claim U.S. citizenship, right? So let's try a different one. And maybe if we keep at this, it'll make a little bit more sense. All right, so I'm going to introduce this with the caveat that I don't really follow sports and I don't know a damn thing about baseball. So this is sort of pure guesswork here, right? So the claim I'm going to make is that the Detroit Tigers, I picked them because this was my dad's team, and you know, so sentimental attachment. The Detroit Tigers will win the World Series this year. The data that I'm using to make this claim is that they have the best pitching in the league. Again, no idea if that's true. What's the warrant here? What's the connecting logic? What am I trying to suggest about what wins baseball games?
The good pitcher wins the World Series.
Exactly, yeah. The pitching is the most important element for a winning baseball team, right? All right, one more. Is this starting to make a little more sense? Okay. So the claim I'm going to make is that the Democrats should hold their next convention in Milwaukee. And the data I'm going to use to support that is that in the 2020 election, they only won Wisconsin narrowly. So what would be my warrant here for making this claim? Why do I think that a political party should hold their convention in a state that they only won narrowly in the last election?
So they can get as many votes as they can for next year.
Okay, that